Shadows at the plaza. The champagne flute trembled in Olivia Bennett's hand as she scanned the glittering ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel. Chandeliers cast diamond patterns across the marble floor where 200 guests, most of whom she'd never met before today, celebrated her wedding to Konstantin Vasilis. The white roses adorning every surface cost more than a month's supplies at her clinic, and the string quartet played music that seemed to belong to another world entirely. Her world consisted of bandages, late nights, and the grateful smiles of patients at the Harborside Free Clinic she'd built from nothing 6 years ago. This world of wealth and whispers felt like stepping into a foreign country without knowing the language. "You look lost, my dove," came Konstantin's deep voice, his Greek accent wrapping around the words like warm honey. His tailored tuxedo emphasized his broad shoulders, and his olive-toned face softened when he looked at her. "Are you happy?" "Of course," Olivia said, touching the delicate diamond pendant he'd given her that morning. "It's just overwhelming." Their courtship had been a whirlwind, 4 months from their first meeting at a hospital fundraiser to today's elaborate wedding. Konstantin had pursued her with an intensity that left her breathless, showering her with thoughtful gifts and genuine interest in her work. When he proposed, bringing her to tears with his speech about how her dedication to helping others had changed his perspective on what mattered in life, she'd said yes despite the warnings from friends about his reputation as a ruthless businessman. "Mr. Vasilis," called one of the hotel staff. "There's a situation requiring your attention." Konstantin squeezed her hand. "I'll return in a moment." As he walked away, Olivia smoothed the silk of her wedding gown, simpler than Konstantin had wanted, but still the most beautiful dress she'd ever worn. At 34, she'd long ago stopped imagining a fairy tale wedding. Her life's purpose had been the clinic, serving the dock workers, fishermen, and struggling families of the harbor district. Well, the nurse who captured the great Konstantin Vasilis. A voice like polished glass cut through Olivia's thoughts. She turned to face a woman whose beauty belonged on magazine covers. Tall and slender, with auburn hair cascading over bare shoulders and a red dress that seemed painted onto her perfect figure. "Victoria," Olivia said, recognizing Konstantin's ex from photographs in society pages. "I don't believe you were on our guest list." Victoria's laugh rang through the ballroom, drawing attention. "Oh, darling, how adorably naive you are." She stepped closer, perfume swirling between them. "I was warming his bed for 3 years. Did you really think a simple nurse with charity case patients would truly capture his heart?" People nearby began to notice, conversation stilling as Victoria's voice rose. "You're causing a scene," Olivia said quietly, heart hammering. "Please leave." "Leave? When I've come to congratulate you on your brilliant performance?" Victoria took a champagne flute from a passing waiter. "Everyone knows. Konstantin needs a respectable wife for the Vasilis shipping expansion. The board was getting concerned about his reputation." She smirked. "You're perfect, the selfless Florence Nightingale who works with the poor. Excellent optics." Heat rushed to Olivia's face as whispers spread through the crowd. She searched for Konstantin but couldn't find him. "You think I married him for his money?" Olivia asked, steadying her voice. "No, sweetheart." Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. "I think he married you for your reputation while keeping his real life and real women on the side." She raised her glass. "To the new Mrs. Vasilis, May. You enjoy the mansion while it lasts." Before Olivia could respond, Victoria's glass suddenly jerked, spilling champagne down the front of her designer dress. Konstantin stood beside them, his face a controlled mask of fury. "Security will escort you out, Victoria," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "And if you ever approach my wife again, I will ensure that every door in this city closes to you, permanently." As security led a protesting Victoria away, murmurs rippled through the ballroom. Konstantin turned to Olivia, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry you had to endure that." But the damage was done. Olivia could see it in the speculative glances, the leaned heads, the judgmental eyebrows. In a single moment, her wedding day had transformed from a dream into something tainted with doubt and whispers. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice wondered, what if Victoria was right? Whispers behind silk. 3 weeks into her marriage, Olivia stood at the window of Constantine's, their seaside mansion, watching waves crash against the private shoreline. The honeymoon in Santorini had been picture perfect, but since returning home, Constantine had thrown himself into work with an intensity that left her wondering about the man she'd married. She traced her finger along the glass. The house staff moved silently around her, treating her with a deference that made her uncomfortable. She missed the bustling energy of her clinic, the grateful squeeze of a patient's hand, the sense of purpose that had defined her life before. Mrs. Vasilis? Elena, the housekeeper, appeared at her side. Mr. Vasilis called. He'll be working late again tonight. Olivia nodded, swallowing her disappointment. Thank you, Elena. Also, Mrs. Pierce called to confirm your attendance at tomorrow's charity luncheon. Olivia suppressed a groan. Josephine Pierce was Constantine's business partner's wife, a woman who had perfected the art of delivering insults wrapped in compliments. Please tell her I'll be there, Olivia said, already dreading the event. After Elena left, Olivia wandered into Constantine's study, a room she rarely entered. Dark wood paneling and leather-bound books created an atmosphere of old money, though she knew Constantine had built his shipping empire from nothing after arriving in America as a teenager. She ran her fingers along his desk, allowing herself this small invasion of his space. A photo of them on their wedding day sat beside his computer, her smile genuine, his eyes holding something she couldn't quite define. Not quite happiness. Something more complex. The desk drawer was partially open. Olivia hesitated, then pulled it wider. Inside lay a folder labeled Harborside Initiative. Her breath caught as she opened it to find financial documents related to her clinic. Anonymous donations that had kept the clinic afloat during its darkest times. Donations she'd never been able to trace. Property deeds for the building her clinic occupied, showing ownership by a shell corporation. Expense reports detailing equipment purchases that had mysteriously arrived when the clinic desperately needed them. What are you doing? Constantine's voice from the doorway made her jump. I thought you were working late, she said, unable to close the folder fast enough. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his expression unreadable. Board meeting ended early. His eyes fell to the open folder. You shouldn't be going through my private papers. These are about my clinic, Olivia said, finding her courage. Why do you have detailed records of its finances? Constantine carefully closed the folder. It's a potential tax write-off, nothing more. These go back years, she pressed. Long before we met. Olivia, he said, his voice softening slightly. Business is complex. Sometimes we make investments for future benefit. Is that what I am? An investment? The words escaped before she could stop them. His expression hardened. You're my wife. Am I? Because sometimes it feels like I'm just playing a role in your life. The charitable wife who gives your business credibility. Victoria's words at the wedding echoed in her mind. Constantine's phone rang and he glanced at it. I need to take this. Of course you do, Olivia murmured as he stepped into the hallway, speaking rapid Greek into his phone. The next day at Josephine Pierce's luncheon, Olivia sat surrounded by the wives of Constantine's business associates, feeling like an exotic specimen under examination. Olivia, darling, Josephine said, refilling wine glasses, tell everyone about your little clinic. It's so heartwarming that Constantine supports your hobby. It's not a hobby, Olivia corrected. It's a fully operational medical facility serving over 2,000 patients annually. How charitable, remarked Sophia Blackwell, wife of a shipping competitor. Though I imagine Constantine's philanthropy extends in many directions. The women exchanged knowing glances. What exactly are you implying? Olivia asked. Josephine patted her hand. Nothing, dear. But men like Constantine have certain patterns. Victoria Chambers was just one in a long line. We were all quite surprised when he married you instead. Perhaps she offered something different, Sophia suggested, examining Olivia like a puzzle to solve. Olivia set down her fork. My husband and I have a private relationship that isn't open for speculation. Of course, Josephine said with false sympathy. Though you might want to ask him about his frequent visits to the harbor district. My driver saw his car there twice last week, nowhere near the shipping offices. The seed of doubt planted at her wedding bloomed larger. What was Constantine hiding? The mysterious folder, his late nights, his visits to her old neighborhood. That evening, when Constantine returned home, she was waiting in the living room. I need the truth, she said. Without preamble, he loosened his tie. About? Everything. The donations to my clinic. Why you married me. What you're doing in the harbor district when you're supposedly working. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but wariness. You've been listening to gossip. I've been finding inconsistencies in what you tell me, she countered. Constantine sighed deeply. Some matters in my business require discretion, Olivia. Not everything can be transparent. Our marriage should be. He approached her, reaching for her hand, which she reluctantly gave. I married you because you're extraordinary. The rest is complicated. That's not good enough, she whispered. His phone rang again. It always did. As he stepped away to answer it, Olivia made a decision. If Constantine wouldn't tell her the truth, she would find it herself. Tomorrow she would return to the harbor district and discover what secrets her husband was keeping there. The harbor's truth. The salt-tinged air of the harbor district wrapped around Olivia like an old friend as she walked the familiar streets where she'd spent years building her clinic. She'd told Constantine she was visiting her former nurse colleague, Gabrielle, giving herself the afternoon to investigate. Rain threatened overhead as she approached the clinic that had been her life's work. Through the window, she could see Dr. Jackson, her replacement, examining a young child while the mother looked on gratefully. The same scenes that had filled her days before Constantine. Miss Olivia. The voice belonged to Thomas, an elderly fisherman who had been one of her first patients. Or should I say Mrs. Fancy now? His weathered face broke into a smile. She embraced him warmly. Just Olivia is fine, Thomas. How's the arthritis? Much better with those new medications. Couldn't afford them before, but the clinic's assistance program covered everything. He nodded appreciatively. Your husband's a good man. Olivia stilled. What do you mean? The funding. When Dr. Jackson took over, he told us Mr. Vasilis had been the anonymous donor all these years. Doubled the clinic's budget after marrying you, too. Thomas looked confused at her expression. You didn't know? No, she said softly. I didn't. After saying goodbye to Thomas, Olivia walked toward the docks, mind racing. Constantine had been funding her clinic for years before they met? Why keep that secret from her even after they married? She ducked into a small cafe as rain began to fall, ordering coffee while she gathered her thoughts. The cafe owner, Maria, recognized her immediately. The doctor returns, Maria exclaimed, bringing over a slice of baklava. On the house for old times. Thank you, Maria. Olivia hesitated. I'm actually trying to track down my husband. I heard he comes to this area sometimes. Maria nodded knowingly. The Greek man with the serious face. Yes, he comes here after visiting the Children's Center. Children's Center? 2 blocks over. The old warehouse converted last year, for kids who need after-school care. He helped. Started, I think. 20 minutes later, Olivia stood outside a brightly painted building that had indeed once been a warehouse. A sign read, Harbor Lights Youth Center. Through the windows, she could see children of various ages engaged in activities, reading, playing chess, working on computers. Can I help you? A woman in her 60s approached, keys jangling at her waist. I'm just looking. Olivia said. This is new since I worked in the neighborhood. Opened 14 months ago, the woman said proudly. I'm Dorothy, the director. It's impressive, Olivia said. I heard Konstantin Vasilis is involved. Dorothy's face brightened. Our guardian angel, though he hates when I call him that. Funds the whole operation, visits weekly to check on the kids. He was here earlier today, in fact. May I look around? The tour revealed a thoughtfully designed space with educational resources, healthy meals, and support services for neighborhood children. In the office, Olivia noticed a framed news article about her clinic from years ago, highlighting her work with children exposed to environmental toxins from the harbor. That was his inspiration, Dorothy said, following her gaze. He read about your work and wanted to complement it with a safe place for kids after school hours. Rain was falling heavily when Olivia left, her mind overwhelmed with revelations. She decided to walk despite the weather, needing time to process. 3 blocks from the youth center, she spotted a familiar black car parked outside a rundown apartment building. Konstantin's driver stood beside it, umbrella in hand. Curiosity pulled her forward. She entered the building, hearing voices from an open apartment door on the 2nd floor. Konstantin's distinctive accent carried down the hallway. Need to accept the treatments, Mrs. Petrov. Your son's condition will only worsen otherwise. We cannot afford it, replied a woman's voice heavy with a Russian accent. Already the regular medications are too much. The cost is irrelevant, Konstantin said firmly. Mikhail's specialist is expecting you tomorrow. My driver will take you. Why you help us? We are nothing to you. There was a pause before Konstantin answered, his voice softer than Olivia had ever heard it. Your husband was on the Athena when it sank. I was the captain. I made a promise to my men that I would care for their families if anything happened. But that was 15 years ago. A promise doesn't expire, Mrs. Petrov. Olivia backed away silently, not wanting to intrude on this private moment. She waited in the lobby until Konstantin descended the stairs, stopping short when he saw her. Olivia. Surprise registered on his face. What are you doing here? Learning about my husband, she said quietly. The man who anonymously funded my clinic for years, who built a youth center inspired by my work, who keeps promises to the families of men lost at sea. Something vulnerable crossed his face, fear, perhaps, of her judgment. Why didn't you tell me, she asked. Would you have believed that a man like me could admire someone like you without ulterior motives? He asked, rainwater dripping from his coat. Or would you have thought I was trying to buy your affection? The truth of his words struck her. She would have been suspicious of his philanthropy if she'd known before getting to know him. Come, he said, extending his hand. I think it's time we talked properly. In the privacy of his car, Konstantin finally began to share his story. Orphaned at 12 in Greece, working on fishing boats, gradually building his shipping business through relentless work and shrewd decisions. His voice softened when he described reading about her clinic 4 years ago. You reminded me that wealth means nothing if not used to help others, he said, eyes on the rain-streaked window. I started watching your work from afar. When we finally met at that fundraiser, I already knew I wanted you in my life. Why the secrecy? Even after we married? He turned to her, vulnerability showing through his usual controlled exterior. Pride, perhaps, or fear that you would see it as manipulation rather than admiration. I wanted you to love Konstantin the man, not Konstantin the benefactor. For the first time since their wedding, Olivia felt she was truly seeing her husband. Not the powerful businessman, but the orphaned boy who had built himself into a man who kept his promises. She reached for his hand across the leather seat. I think it's time I got to know my husband. Breaking tides, the Grand Oceanic Hotel ballroom sparkled with the wealth of the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers reflected in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, where the lights of ships twinkled like earthbound stars. The annual Hawaii Maritime Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, raising millions for ocean conservation and maritime education. Olivia stood beside Konstantin, finally feeling like she belonged at his side. The past month had transformed their marriage, as Constantine gradually lowered his walls, sharing both his business and his charitable work with her. She had resumed volunteer hours at her old clinic while helping Dorothy expand programs at the youth center. Mrs. Vasilis greeted Edward Blackwell, Sophia's husband and Constantine's chief competitor. "You're looking radiant tonight. Marriage agrees with you." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell," she replied, noting the calculating look in his eyes. "Constantine," he continued, "I was surprised to hear about your bid for the Westport development. Quite ambitious." Constantine's hand tightened slightly on Olivia's waist. "The port expansion will create hundreds of jobs. It's worth the investment." "If the environmental impact study goes your way," Blackwell said with a tight smile. "I hear there are concerns." Before Constantine could respond, the crowd parted like water around a stone. Victoria Chambers glided toward them in a shimmering gold gown, a portfolio clutched in one manicured hand. "How cozy," she said, eyes moving between Constantine and Olivia. "The humanitarian power couple of the year." Constantine's posture stiffened. "You weren't invited, Victoria." "Oh, but I have something everyone here will want to see." She tapped the portfolio. "Especially the Maritime Foundation board members." Whispers rippled through nearby guests. Olivia felt Constantine preparing to call security, but she touched his arm gently. "Let's hear what she thinks she has." Victoria's smile was triumphant as she addressed the growing crowd around them. "Everyone here admires Constantine Vasilis, the self-made man with the charitable heart. But what if his environmental record isn't as clean as his public image?" Blackwell stepped closer. Interest piqued. "What are you suggesting, Ms. Chambers?" "I have proof that Vasilis Shipping has been dumping contaminated ballast water in protected areas," Victoria announced, opening her portfolio. "Environmental violations that would destroy not only the Westport bid but possibly the entire company." Gasps and murmurs spread through the ballroom. Olivia looked at Constantine, whose face had gone pale. "Constantine?" she whispered. "It's not true," he said quietly, eyes fixed on Victoria. "But she has something." Victoria removed a stack of documents. "These reports show testing from Vasilis vessels with falsified environmental certificates, signed by the captain himself." Constantine stepped forward. "Those are forgeries." "Are they?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Or just inconvenient truths about the real Constantine Vasilis, the man who builds his fortune on looking the other way, while his ships poison the very waters this foundation aims to protect?" The room had gone silent, all eyes on Constantine. Olivia could feel the weight of judgment pressing down, reminding her of her own wedding day humiliation. But this time, she knew her husband. "If I may," she said, stepping forward. Victoria laughed. "The nurse is going to explain environmental regulations now?" "No," Olivia said calmly. "I'm going to explain my husband." She turned to address the crowd. "Many of you see Constantine Vasilis as just another wealthy businessman. Some of you believe he married me as some sort of public relations move. The truth is far simpler and far more remarkable." She took the documents from Victoria's hands, glancing at them briefly. "These papers may look convincing to those who don't know shipping protocols, but they're missing the sequential verification codes required on all ballast testing since 2018. Constantine looked at her in surprise. "I've spent the last month learning my husband's business," she explained to him before turning back to the crowd. "What these fraudulent papers can't explain is why Constantine invested $15 million in advanced filtration systems for his entire fleet 3 years before regulations required it, or why Vasilis Shipping employs marine biologists to monitor ecosystem impact around all their routes." She handed the documents to Raymond Morris, the foundation's chairman. "You'll find these don't match any official records. What will match is Constantine's donation history to marine conservation, anonymous until tonight." Victoria's confident smile faltered. "You're just defending him because I know him," Olivia interrupted. "Not the public figure or the wealthy businessman, but the man who has spent years quietly helping others without seeking recognition." Constantine stepped forward, taking Olivia's hand. "What my wife says is true. The documents are forgeries, which the Foundation's experts will confirm. His gaze found Blackwell in the crowd, perhaps created by competitors who fear losing the Westport bid fairly. Blackwell's face reddened as he backed away. Constantine continued, his voice strong and clear. But Olivia is right about something more important. I have kept my charitable work private, perhaps out of pride or fear of it being seen as a public relations strategy. That ends tonight. He addressed the entire ballroom. 4 years ago, I read about a nurse who had opened a free clinic in the Harbor District, treating families poisoned by industrial waste that companies like mine had contributed to over decades. That nurse, now my wife, showed me that real strength comes not from accumulating wealth but from using it to repair damage and prevent future harm. Olivia squeezed his hand as he continued. Tonight, I am announcing the Vasilis Foundation for harbor restoration with an initial endowment of $50 million. My wife will direct its work, combining environmental cleanup with health care for affected communities. Victoria stood forgotten as applause erupted through the ballroom. She slipped away as Constantine continued outlining his vision for ethical shipping practices and community investment. Later, as they danced beneath the chandeliers, Olivia rested her head against Constantine's chest. You didn't have to make such a grand gesture. It wasn't a gesture, he said softly. It was time to bring what was in shadow into the light. No more secrets between us. No more secrets, she agreed, looking up at him. Though I have one small one left. His eyebrow raised questioningly. I think, she whispered, we're going to need to add a children's wing to that Foundation headquarters. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by joy that transformed his usually serious features. As he pulled her closer, Olivia realized they had both found something neither expected, not just love, but a partner who truly saw them for who they were. Morning light dawn broke over the private beach behind the Vasilis' mansion, painting the waves in gold and rose. Olivia sat on the sand, her growing belly finally showing at 5 months pregnant. Behind her, the house, once so intimidating, had become home, filled with warmth and purpose as both she and Constantine had transformed it together. She heard his footsteps approaching, then felt the warmth of a blanket around her shoulders. You should have woken me, Constantine said, settling beside her on the sand. You were sleeping so peacefully for once. She leaned against him. The Tokyo contract negotiations must have been exhausting. Worth it. He placed his hand gently over her stomach. The new environmental standards will change shipping practices across the Pacific. Olivia smiled, covering his hand with hers. Your father would be proud. In the month since the gala, Constantine had shared more about his past. Not just the orphaned boy who built an empire, but the son of a simple fisherman who had died trying to save others when their boat capsized during a storm. His father's sacrifice had shaped Constantine's sense of responsibility, driving both his business ambition and his private philanthropy. Perhaps, Constantine said, watching the waves. Though he would be more impressed with the clinic's expansion. How is Dr. Jackson handling the new pediatric wing? Overwhelmed but grateful, the additional staff helps. Olivia had merged her medical expertise with Constantine's resources, creating a network of community health centers throughout the Harbor District. The lead screening program has already identified 60 children needing treatment. They sat in comfortable silence. As the sun rose higher, so much had changed in a year. From their awkward first meeting to the wedding day humiliation to this hard-won peace between them. I received a letter from Victoria yesterday, Constantine said unexpectedly. Olivia tensed slightly. After the gala, Victoria had disappeared from their lives, though they'd heard she had moved to Europe. She's in Milan, he continued. Getting married, apparently. The letter was apologetic in her way. That's unexpected. Constantine shrugged. People can change. We did. It was true. The controlled, secretive man she'd married had opened himself to vulnerability and partnership, and she had grown from the idealistic but naive nurse into a woman who understood how to wield influence and resources to help more people than she could have alone. "I have something for you," Constantine said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box. "We're already married," Olivia teased as she accepted it. "Open it." Inside lay a simple silver key. "What's this for?" "The lighthouse." He nodded toward the old structure at the end of their property. A 19th century lighthouse that had stood abandoned since modern navigation systems had rendered it obsolete. "It's yours now. Renovated as your private space to use, however." "You wish." Emotion tightened her throat as she remembered telling him months ago about her childhood dream of living in a lighthouse. "When did you do this?" "It's been in progress since we returned from our honeymoon. I wanted to give you something that was just yours, not connected to my world or even our foundation work." Olivia leaned over to kiss him, the simple thoughtfulness of the gift meaning more than any diamond or designer item ever could. Later that day, they walked hand in hand to the lighthouse. The spiral staircase led to a circular room at the top, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the ocean. Constantine had furnished it simply but beautifully: comfortable chairs, bookshelves, a writing desk positioned to face the sea. "It's perfect," she whispered, running her hand along the smooth wooden desk. "There's one more thing." He pointed to a small brass plaque mounted beside the door. It read simply, "When the world seems darkest, be the light that guides others, home." "My father's words," she said, tears filling her eyes. Her father, a paramedic who had died helping others during a highway pileup, had said this to her when she decided to become a nurse. Constantine wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands cradling their growing child. "Our son or daughter will grow up knowing both of our father's legacies: courage, service, and keeping one's promises." As they stood together watching ships pass on the horizon, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Their beginning had been shadowed by misconceptions and secrets, by a woman's cruel laughter and whispered doubts. But the truth had proven stronger. The truth of a man who had quietly admired her work long before they met, who had built his life around principles deeper than wealth could measure. "What are you thinking?" Constantine asked, his breath warm against her hair. "That sometimes," she said, turning in his arms to face him, "the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful destinations." The lighthouse keeper's quarters would become their private retreat over the years that followed, through the birth of their daughter Sophia, the expansion of the Vasilis Foundation across 3 continents, and the gradual transformation of the harbor district from industrial wasteland to thriving community. It stood as a symbol of what they had built together, a beacon of hope, a safe harbor in life's storms, and a reminder that true love often arrives in packages nothing like what we expected. And sometimes, Olivia reflected as they renewed their vows on their 5th anniversary in that lighthouse with only their daughter and closest friends as witnesses, the judgments and laughter of others become nothing but distant echoes, drowned out by the steady rhythm of 2 hearts that found each other across impossible odds. The shipping magnate and the harbor nurse, unlikely partners in healing both the ocean and its people.